The intergalactic veterinary outpost floated in the vast expanse of space, a shimmering beacon of advanced medicine and multicultural cooperation. Its translucent domes glinted under the pale light of a nearby pulsar, and sleek corridors spiraled outward like the petals of a cosmic flower. Creatures of all shapes and sizes moved through the outpost's bustling halls, tentacle beings gliding effortlessly beside humanoid figures clad in sleek environmental suits. The hum of alien machinery harmonized with the chatter of dozens of languages, creating a symphony of life that spoke of unity in purpose. Dr. Marcus Harlow stepped off the docking ramp of the transport shuttle, his booted feet hitting the polished floor with a confident thud. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the easy assurance of someone who had stared down chaos and emerged victorious. The human veterinarian had made a name for himself back on Earth, pioneering techniques that blended cutting-edge technology with intuitive care. But here, on this distant outpost where species from across the galaxy converge, he was just another outsider, a curiosity to be observed but not fully trusted. The message that had summoned him here crackled in his mind like static. A critical case involving a revered Galraxian life form, injured and on the brink of death. The Galraxians were a proud, meticulous species known for their bioluminescent physiology and deep connection to their planet's ecosystem. Losing one of these creatures wasn't just a biological tragedy. It was a cultural catastrophe. As Harlow navigated the maze-like corridors, holographic signs flickered in various languages, guiding him toward the medical bay. He adjusted the strap of his medical kit, the familiar weight grounding him. Despite the advanced technologies housed within the outpost, Harlow had learned that sometimes the simplest tools and a steady hand were what mattered most. The doors to the central operating chamber slid open with a hiss, revealing a gleaming space filled with diagnostic consoles and containment fields. Standing at the heart of the room was Dr. Trex, an imposing figure draped in flowing green robes that shimmered with embedded data streams. His elongated, segmented limbs moved with precise efficiency as he examined a holographic projection of the injured creature. Harlow's arrival drew a glance from Trex, whose luminous yellow eyes narrowed with skepticism. The Galraxian was one of the most respected xenobiologists in the galaxy, his expertise spanning centuries. Yet there was no warmth in his gaze, only thinly veiled disdain. "You must be the human," Trex said, his voice resonating with a metallic timbre. "Dr. Marcus Harlow." "That's me," Harlow replied evenly, stepping forward. "I hear you've got a tough case." Trex flicked a clawed digit toward the hologram, where the creature's fractured neural pathways and internal hemorrhaging were displayed in brutal detail. Its massive, translucent form pulsed weakly, bioluminescent patterns fading like a dying star. "It is beyond saving," Trex declared bluntly. "We have attempted every known procedure. Neural collapse is inevitable. Cellular degradation has already set in. No one can save it." Harlow studied the projection, his mind already mapping out potential strategies. He had seen worse back on Earth. Creatures mangled in industrial accidents, exotic pets poisoned by synthetic toxins. Each time, the odds had been against him, and each time he had found a way. "Maybe no one's tried the right thing yet," Harlow said, his tone calm but resolute. Trex's mandibles clicked in what might have been irritation or disbelief. "Your species has an unfortunate tendency toward reckless optimism." Harlow allowed himself a wry smile. "We call it persistence." Without waiting for an invitation, he moved closer to the hologram, his fingers dancing over the control panel to magnify the creature's neural matrix. The damage was severe, no doubt about it, but there were faint signals, flickers of activity that suggested a sliver of hope. "What if we stimulate these pathways with a regenerative nanite infusion?" Harlow suggested, tracing a cluster of neural nodes. "Combined with targeted bioelectric pulses, it might stabilize the collapse." Trex scoffed. "Such a procedure has never been attempted on a Galraxian life form. The risks are astronomical. So are the rewards," Harlow countered. "If we do nothing, It's dead anyway. What do we have to lose? Silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Around them, the medical staff, aliens with shimmering scales, feathery appendages, and iridescent skin, watched the exchange with rapt attention. Finally, Twex exhaled a low, vibrating hum. Very well, human. You may proceed, but mark my words. When this fails, the responsibility will be yours. Harlow met the alien's gaze without flinching. Deal. As Twex stepped aside, Harlow set down his kit and began unpacking his tools. His heart beat steadily, not from nerves but from the thrill of the challenge. He lived for moments like this, when the impossible loomed large, and all that stood between failure and success was a single determined individual. The creature's shallow, labored breaths echoed through the chamber, each one a reminder of the stakes. Time was slipping away, and Harlow knew that hesitation was the enemy. But doubt had never been part of his process. Watch me, he muttered under his breath as he prepared for the most critical operation of his career. Dr. Marcus Harlow stood over the luminescent creature. Its shimmering glow now reduced to faint pulses along its translucent body. Each flicker seemed weaker than the last, as though the life within it were slipping further into the void. The diagnostic displays projected above the operating table painted a grim picture: fractured neural pathways, hemorrhaging within its central vessel system, and a rapid breakdown of cellular integrity. By any conventional standard, the prognosis was hopeless. Yet Harlow wasn't one for conventional standards. He adjusted the projection, magnifying a complex tangle of neural fibers that glowed faintly in response to the scan. Despite the devastation, there were faint currents of activity, like stubborn embers refusing to be extinguished. He leaned in closer, ignoring the oppressive presence of Dr. Twex, who observed from a few steps away with his usual air of disapproval. You see that? Harlow pointed to a cluster of neural nodes flickering weakly along the creature's spine. There's still viable activity in the tertiary neural pathways. Twex let out a sharp, metallic hiss. Irrelevant. Neural degradation will consume those pathways within the next cycle. Even your primitive scanners must detect the cellular apoptosis spreading outward. Harlow's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone measured. It's not irrelevant if we can stabilize it. Those pathways are the key to keeping this thing alive long enough to repair the damage. Tvex's segmented limbs clicked together in what might have been a gesture of frustration or dismissal. Your species clings to optimism like a parasite to a host. This is not a Terran dog with a broken limb, Dr. Harlow. This is a Galraxian elder beast, a cornerstone of our ecosystem. It does not respond to desperation masquerading as ingenuity. Harlow met the alien's glowing eyes without flinching. You called me here because everything you tried failed. Maybe it's time for a different approach. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the outpost's medical systems. Around them, other specialists monitored their consoles, hesitant to interrupt the tense exchange. The stakes were clear to everyone in the room. If the creature died, the ecological balance of an entire planetary system would be thrown into chaos. Twex finally broke the silence. What foolishness are you proposing, human? Regenerative nanites, Harlow said, pulling up a holographic model of the microscopic machines he had engineered back on Earth. They're designed to repair neural tissue on a cellular level. Combined with controlled bioelectric pulses, they could rebuild the damaged pathways before the apoptosis spreads. Tvex's mandibles clicked sharply. Nanites? You would introduce synthetic constructs into a sacred life form? Blasphemy! It's not blasphemy. It's science, Harlow shot back. And right now, it's your best shot. The Galraxian vet's glowing eyes narrowed, but there was no immediate rebuttal. Harlow pressed his advantage. Look, I get it. You don't trust human methods. But we're not talking about tradition here. We're talking about survival. If we don't try this, we both know what happens next. Twex exhaled a low, vibrating hum, a sound that resonated through the room like a tremor. The procedure is reckless. But perhaps recklessness is preferable to failure. Glad we're on the same page, Harlow said, already pulling up the necessary calibrations on his wrist display. I'll need a biochemist to monitor cellular integration and a neural empath to help guide the recovery process. Twex gestured to one of the assistants, a Galraxian empath with shimmering blue tendrils that pulse faintly in sync with the injured creature. Sorry will assist. And I will observe your folly personally. Fine by me, Harlow said without missing a beat. But if you're going to watch, maybe lend a hand when things get hairy. With the team assembled, Harlow set to work. The first challenge was stabilizing the creature's hemorrhaging core. As the empath Sari projected calming neural waves, Harlow introduced the regenerative nanites into the creature's bloodstream through a carefully guided injection. The tiny constructs shimmered briefly as they dispersed, targeting areas of critical damage. Monitors blared warnings as the creature's vitals dipped dangerously low. Twex moved forward, his segmented arms manipulating the bioelectric calibrators with expert precision. For all his disdain, the alien vet was undeniably brilliant, and Harlow found himself grudgingly impressed. Voltage is too high, Harlow warned. Drop it by half or we'll trigger a complete neural collapse. Twex adjusted the controls without argument. The tension between them momentarily set aside in the face of the crisis. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Sweat beaded on Harlow's brow as he guided the nanites, their microscopic repairs barely keeping ahead of the cellular degradation. The creature's body shuddered violently, bioluminescence flaring in erratic bursts. We're losing it, Sari said, her voice strained. Not yet, Harlow muttered, his fingers flying across the control panel. Come on, hold together. A sudden surge of energy coursed through the creature's form, stabilizing its vital signs. The erratic pulses steadied, and the glow along its translucent body began to brighten. The monitors, once blaring with alarms, now hummed with a steady rhythm. Harlow exhaled sharply, the knot in his chest loosening. That's more like it. Twex observed the recovery with an inscrutable expression. Temporary success does not guarantee survival. Maybe not, Harlow admitted, wiping his forehead. But it's a start. The creature's breathing deepened, each exhale less labored than the last. The faint bioluminescent patterns along its body pulsed in steady, rhythmic waves, a sign of renewed life. As the team began post-procedure assessments, Harlow felt a flicker of triumph tempered by caution. The battle was far from over, but they had bought the creature time, and with time came possibility. Tvex's gaze lingered on the now stabilized form of the Galraxian elder beast. You are reckless, human, he said finally. But perhaps recklessness has its merits. Harlow smirked faintly. Told you to watch me. The sterile hum of the operating chamber was punctuated only by the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the faint crackle of bioelectric fields. Dr. Marcus Harlow stood at the head of the massive, translucent creature, every sense locked onto the task before him. Its faint bioluminescence flickered unevenly, a fragile heartbeat written in light. Time was running out, and failure was not an option. The creature's shimmering body was suspended within a containment field, arcs of pale blue energy stabilizing its form. Neural pathways, barely functional, pulsed erratically across its translucent frame, a chaotic symphony of fraying life. Harlow's jaw clenched as he calibrated the bioelectric pulse generators, sweat dampening his temples despite the cool, controlled environment. Voltage stable at 2.3 microvolts, reported Sari, the Galraxian empath assisting him. Her tendrils glowed faintly as she maintained a delicate neural connection with the creature. But its consciousness is fragmented, scattered across multiple nodes. If synchronization isn't restored soon, collapse is inevitable. We'll restore it, Harlow said firmly. His hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting the nanite dispensers to ensure an even distribution. We have to. Across from him, Dr. Twex monitored the containment field with unblinking focus. Despite his earlier skepticism, the veteran xenobiologist had stepped into the fray without hesitation when the creature's condition deteriorated. His segmented limbs operated multiple consoles simultaneously, each movement fluid and precise. The neural matrix is destabilizing faster than predicted, Tvex warned, his voice cold but steady. Your nanites are insufficient to counteract the degradation. Harlow didn't look up. They're not supposed to do it alone. We need the bioelectric pulses in perfect sync with the neural repairs. If we get that alignment right, the regenerative process will cascade naturally, and if you're wrong, then this thing dies, Harlow admitted, his voice hard. But if we do nothing, it's already dead. Tvex made a low, vibrating hum. Whether of agreement or disdain, Harlow couldn't tell. The Galraxian's mandibles twitched as he recalibrated the containment field, reinforcing it against the creature's involuntary spasms. A sudden jolt rocked the operating table as the creature convulsed violently. Warning alarms blared, red lights flashing across the chamber. Energy spike, Sari shouted, her tendrils flaring brightly. It's rejecting the stabilization field. Hold it steady. Harlow barked, sweat now streaming down his face. Tvex, dampen the feedback loop now. The alien vet's limbs blurred as he executed the command, his movements swift and efficient. The arcs of blue energy surrounding the creature flickered, then steadied, containing its thrashing form. Feedback loop neutralized, Tvex reported grimly. But the neural collapse has accelerated. Harlow's mind raced. They were on the edge of failure, teetering on the brink. Every instinct told him to push harder, to double down on the bioelectric pulses and flood the creature's system with regenerative nanites. But experience tempered his impulse. This wasn't a brute force problem. It required finesse. Reduce the pulse frequency by 20%, Harlow ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. That will weaken the stabilization effect, Tvex objected. Exactly, Harlow said. We're overwhelming it. We need to give its neural network room to recalibrate on its own. For a tense moment, Tvex hesitated, clearly battling his instinct to maintain total control. But then, with a sharp click of his mandibles, he complied. The energy field softened, its harsh glow dimming to a gentler hue. The creature's convulsions slowed, its bioluminescence flickering with tentative steadiness. Neural activity is stabilizing, Sari reported, all creeping into her usually composed voice. It's responding. Harlow exhaled sharply, his hand still poised over the controls. Good. Keep monitoring for irregularities. Minutes passed in tense silence, each second stretching into eternity. The creature's breathing, once shallow and erratic, deepened into a steady rhythm. Its translucent form pulsed with a renewed glow, bioluminescent patterns flowing in harmonious waves. We're not out of the woods yet, Harlow cautioned, though relief tinged his voice. But this is a good sign. Tvex observed the creature with an expression that, for once, bordered on respect. Your methods are unconventional, human, but effective. I'll take that as a compliment, Harlow said, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. The empath Sari tilted her head, her glowing tendrils swaying gently. It's grateful, she said softly, her voice tinged with wonder. It can't form coherent thoughts yet, but there's gratitude. Harlow nodded, his chest tightening with a mix of exhaustion and triumph. We're not done, but we're getting there. The chamber, which had been a battlefield moments ago, now thrummed with the steady hum of recovery. The monitors displayed stabilized vitals, and the containment field shimmered gently around the creature's resting form. As Harlow began the post-operation protocols, he caught Tvex watching him intently. You're not what I expected, Tvex admitted grudgingly. People usually say that, Harlow replied dryly. The Galraxian vet inclined his head slightly. Perhaps your species has more to offer than I previously believed. We like to surprise people, Harlow said, his tone light but his gaze steady. And we're not done surprising you yet. The glow of the creature brightened slightly, a silent promise that the fight was far from over. But for the first time, hope lingered in the air. The silence in the operating chamber was profound. broken only by the faint hum of cooling systems and the steady beeping of monitors. The once chaotic flurry of activity had stilled, leaving only the lingering weight of what had just transpired. Dr. Marcus Harlow stood motionless, eyes fixed on the massive, bioluminescent creature now resting peacefully within the containment field. Its translucent body glowed softly, each pulse of light a testament to life reclaimed. Sorry, the Galraxian empath withdrew her tendrils from the neural interface, her shimmering blue skin dimming as the mental link faded. She exhaled shakily, all still evident in her wide, luminous eyes. "It's remarkable," she whispered. "The neural pathways are fully synchronized. The energy flow is steady. I've never felt anything like this." "It's alive," Harlow confirmed, his voice rough with exhaustion. Relief coursed through him, mingling with the adrenaline that still thrummed in his veins. "And stable." Tvek stood at the opposite console, his segmented limbs at rest for the first time since the operation began. He regarded the scene with a mixture of disbelief and grudging admiration. "Your methods defied reason," he said, his voice stripped of its usual derision. "And yet they succeeded. I did not believe this outcome was possible." Harlow wiped the sweat from his brow, a dry laugh escaping him. "I get that a lot." The Galraxian vet inclined his head slightly, a gesture that carried the weight of formal acknowledgement. "You have earned my respect, Dr. Harlow. Few would have dared such a course of action. Fewer still would have prevailed." "I'll take that as a compliment," Harlow said with a tired grin. The creature stirred slightly within the containment field, its glowing patterns shifting in gentle waves. Sari's tendrils flickered as she attuned briefly to its thoughts. "It's at peace," she said softly. "Grateful and healing." "Good," Harlow said. "It's been through enough." The monitors continued their steady rhythm, displaying normalized vitals and restored neural activity. What had once seemed an insurmountable challenge, a hopeless case dismissed by even the galaxy's most advanced minds, was now a triumph of persistence and ingenuity. Technicians began dismantling the containment apparatus, their movements careful but efficient. The crisis was over, and protocol demanded a thorough debriefing. But for now, the atmosphere in the chamber was one of quiet celebration. As the team dispersed, Tvex lingered near Harlow. "I have spent centuries refining my knowledge of xenobiology," he said thoughtfully. "Yet today, I was reminded that certainty can be a barrier rather than a guide." Harlow nodded. "Sometimes you've got to break the rules to find the right solution." Tvex's mandibles clicked softly. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your species, persistence, as you call it." "Glad you're coming around," Harlow said with a smirk. "We're not so bad once you get to know us." The Galraxian vet's glowing eyes flickered with what might have been amusement. Indeed, as Tvex moved toward the exit, Sari approached Harlow, her expression thoughtful. "You change more than just the fate of this creature today," she said. "Tvex is not easily swayed. You've made an impression." "Good to know I'm making friends," Harlow quipped, though there was warmth beneath his humor. "But honestly, I'm just glad we saved it." Sari inclined her head. "So am I." The two stood in companionable silence, watching the creature as it rested peacefully. Its bioluminescence pulsed in a steady, soothing rhythm, a living symbol of resilience and renewal. Finally, Harlow exhaled deeply, the weight of the past hours settling over him. "Time for a shower and about 12 hours of sleep," he said wryly. Sari smiled faintly. "You've earned it, Dr. Harlow." As he made his way toward the exit, Harlow allowed himself a rare moment of pride. The path had been fraught with obstacles, doubt, and near disaster. But in the end, they had achieved what had once seemed impossible. The creature lived, and in doing so, it had not only defied the odds, but also forged an unlikely alliance between those who had once stood divided by skepticism and tradition. Harlow knew the journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more battles to fight. But for now, there was triumph, and sometimes that was enough.